Top 5 Big 12 portal questions. It's portal week, the next couple weeks until, I guess, the 29th. The portal's open, and it's going right now. But the Big 12 has a few questions that I wanted to pose to you guys. Number 5. Who will be left wanting after the window closes? Which team is not going to get what they want and is not in a position to get what they want right now? After the news today, I'm going to tell you, I think it might be Cincinnati. Not just because of what they don't get in, but because of losing Ben Bryant. If Emory Jones is going to be your starter, that is not a question I want the answer to.
If the answer's Emory Jones, you don't want to know the question?
I don't want to know. Yeah, I don't want to know it. He's been at 2 spots. He's not at his third. Unless Scott Satterfield has some sort of witch doctor on the staff or there's an Angels in the outfield situation, I don't know how that's going to be good for that offense. So I do wonder who, because there's always going to be one team that's kind of left out of it. And look, Baylor didn't take enough people in the portal a year ago. They didn't really do enough at certain positions. So they were one of the teams. I don't know if they were, or was it 2 years ago where I feel they didn't do enough.
No, it was last year because I asked they won titles.
Yeah, that's true.
They were fine.
So a year ago I didn't think they did enough at certain positions to do what they needed to do,
because he said he wanted to give those who had been around, and it didn't work out.
Well, he also struck out. I mean, Jackson Player was not what you expected him to be. I mean, he had a fine season, I'm sure, but he was not the guy who stood out at Tulsa. I can think, and I like Jackson a lot, but I think he would admit his frustration with last year, and some of that's on him, I'm sure. Some of that's on the staff. Some of that's just, everybody can share responsibility, but they hit big on the handful of guys they had 2 years ago, and they were just kind of last year. As far as I'm trying to think who else besides Jackson Player was a transfer in.
Okay. It wasn't a quarterback. It was not a defensive back, I don't believe.
Y'all can't help it all here. Josh White and Luke Anthony. And, was that it, really?
Yeah.
I guess they didn't go too high into that. Yeah, CJ Rogers wasn't really
and he would. And by the way, the competition, I got to note that the competition at Texas State, he did not win the quarterback competition.
Yeah.
I think it's Malik Hornsby.
Yeah, maybe that's why none of us can think off the top of our heads, is because it was 2 guys. So they didn't really even delve into it. And so that was a 50% hit rate anyways, because Jackson did not hit at least to the level that they thought he would. So, and
he only had a year. And so now that we'll see what happens with Josh White. So.
Yeah, I think Josh White's going to be fine in the long run. But yeah, it's a tricky proposition, the whole transfer portal thing. I can tell you right now, the guy on the right is not really looking for anything. I just saw an interview with him yesterday that he's saying it would have to be a want rather than a need. They don't have needs. He said, we've got dudes. And so he's, at least in Lubbock, they're not really scouting for any transfer portal guys unless they just absolutely have to have somebody. So, yeah, there are a lot of people in very different positions for sure.
Yeah. Number 4, does Texas have a big move or two up their sleeve? Because Trill Carter was a nice one from Minnesota that they just picked up along the defensive line to help their depth there. I'm wondering of some of these other guys that are in there, are they ready to make a move that will put them in real contention to hold on, down the line? Because look, people can, poo-poo the portal all you want, but right now it's really affecting. If you get the right guys and they fit the system the right way, you're talking about maybe the difference between winning the conference and not.
Yeah, I think they've pretty much made their big moves. They've made some nice. I don't think that's a team that.
Because they don't really need to. That's why I wonder if they can just go, all right, well, this guy's here. Here's a position where we could be a little better. Let's go get him.
Yeah, to answer this question, I have no idea. But, yeah, they would be as well positioned as anybody, you would think, just with what they already sell anyways, and also just the position that they're in heading into next year, at least the way that it appears, where, they're probably the odds-on favorite, if not, neck and neck with Tech probably for the favorite next year in the Big 12. So, yeah, it's entirely possible. I just don't know who that would be for them.
Yeah. Number 3, what does the TCU wide receiver room look like now? I don't know if there's a position group in the Big 12 that will be as different as this room from one year to the next, considering that Darius Davis and Quentin Johnston are both gone. In the NFL draft, you already lost some transfers in. You are out. You brought some transfers in. Jordan Hudson leaves now. I mean, look, if the wide receivers were in a room with the coaching staff and they closed their eyes and said, okay, everybody who's going to leave, go out. Everybody who's going to be here, come in. Like, would they know all those guys' names right now? It's pretty interesting. And look, they'll probably make quick work of it, but it is pretty interesting that this is a position that had so much flux on this roster that was so strong last year.
They got a kid named DJ Allen. I don't know about his expectations. He was highly recruited. USC, I think. I know Baylor was in on him. He's a redshirt freshman, and I'm looking at their depth chart. It's not like he just popped up to the top of my head. But
depth chart is basically all transfers.
Yeah.
Their depth chart is numerous transfers, whether it's Jalen Robinson from UCF, or whether it was
J.P. Richardson,
JoJo Earl, J.P.
Alabama.
Richardson from Oklahoma State. I mean, that's their wide receiver room. It's not the guys who were there for 4 and 5 years like they had last year. I mean, Darius Davis was around. Quentin Johnston was around. Those guys were at least 4-year guys, and that was homegrown talent. And Jalen Robinson was at UCF, and then he was at Ole Miss. He's on his third team now with TCU. So on paper, that looks great. Those are all guys who have proven something or were highly rated. But, yeah, it looks a lot different. But it's not all a bunch of just no-named freshmen, having to fill in the blanks. They went heavy in the portal at wide receiver.
Earl from Alabama, Trey Sanders, the running back from Alabama, Tommy Brockemeyer, the offensive lineman from Alabama. Hey, those are guys recruited heavily. Can they be who they were coming out of high school as far as reach that would help set them up pretty well.
Yeah, I like that Alabama is TCU's developmental squad. Number 2. Can Baylor fill the holes in the secondary? I think. Look, they did really well to get Vaughns from Utah State on the defensive line as a pass rusher. I think that another defensive lineman probably wouldn't hurt them, but I do think that the biggest thing they need to worry about is the secondary. That's the one where they have the most questions. Can they get some guys in there that are ready to start, ready to play in the Big 12? That, I think, will affect this defense a ton this year. And look, Dave Aranda's proven in the past, like he coached it at cornerback U and got a lot of those guys in. So if you want to come and play for a guy who can coach you up, it's a head. I mean, he just give you expertise. That's a good one, but there's for the guys that are in there right now, there's a lot of other factors other than can this guy make me better on the field, because we're talking NIL here and those defensive backs are getting a lot.
How much does Matt Powledge come into play in perhaps also giving them a spark too?
Can they? Will they?
I'm leery of this.
Yeah, I don't know. Especially they're talking about playing more man-to-man. All I know is they cost themselves a lot last year by having to basically prop up that secondary to not have it giving up 5,000 yards per game in the air and 25 passing touchdowns. I mean, they basically did everything they can to keep the dam from breaking back there. They can't afford to do that this year. Clearly, that didn't work very well for them. So can they? Yeah. Will they? I don't know, because like you said, if it was normal times, then they could probably find a transfer or two just on the up and up. But now in NIL, I mean, there are teams who probably have 3 corners that are like, well, we'll just go buy another one anyways because they can.
Well, there's one 90 miles south that's doing it. So.
Yeah, I mean, because they can. So, and at Baylor, they don't necessarily have that luxury to do that. But if they're going to pool their money together and go get somebody, it'll probably be at cornerback. That's where my bet would be more than anywhere else for sure.
Yep. And number 1, can OU get enough starters to contend? I think that we heard from Joshua Quiston earlier, they have expectations, but this is a team that I mean, I don't think we're talking, Craig, and maybe I'm wrong here, about they're like 1 or 2 guys from being back in it. Like, they've got a lot of spots to fill on this roster to be back in it for conference contention. I think they'll be better than they were last year, especially if Dylan Gabriel just stays healthy. They're a win or 2 better no matter what. But I do wonder, do they have enough guys and enough depth right now to contend for the conference, or can they get enough in the portal to make that happen?
Craig is an OU guy and loves the program, but I got to ask you this. If they're not better than last year, will Venables be there for year 3?
Yeah, I don't think you can make a coaching change heading into the SEC. I don't believe so.
Didn't think of it that way.
I don't believe so. I mean, I just think that's way too much turnover to ask for, and then you're throwing out the new guy that very first year to basically just get smashed on, and then you make the move. And I I don't know. I think you give it a year. If Venables gets his head kicked in 2 years in a row now, then you have every justification in the world to do that. But I don't think that firing guys after 2 years is a very smart practice. I mean, maybe that's the new practice in the SEC that they'll start to adopt, but I don't know. I think you got to give it more time than just 2 years to see. I mean, that was a big investment in him, and that's a guy that they knew very well. I think to bring in somebody that close to the program, as the successor to Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley and all those successes, I think he probably has a shorter leash than having just free reign. But I don't know. I think it's very interesting that you kind of heard the skepticism in Josh McCuistion's voice. And I've been saying, I love the SEC move just on the surface of, the travel, the places, the new teams. I mean, every week seemingly will have kind of a name matchup, except for the weeks when you play some of the, other schools that don't have as much pizzazz as Alabama and Auburn and Florida and Georgia and all the others. But that's a very short list. That's Vanderbilt and, Missouri, but Kentucky, there's Oklahoma's got ties.
Getting better.
Yeah, Oklahoma's got ties with Missouri. Kentucky maybe is not super exciting, but even then, in basketball, there's a lot to get excited about. But I've been saying the entire time, do people, however, realize that with all that money and all that security and all those matchups and all those trips and all that's going to be great and that's going to last you a while. But there is a very real chance that you just committed some form of football suicide as far as where you've been in the ecosystem. And I know it's Oklahoma, and they've been around since Bud Wilkinson in the 50s, and they've won 7 national titles and more than a handful of Heisman and all that. So if anybody could adapt, it is probably them. But I am a little bit leery of just are you quite sure about how quickly you're going to jump in the deep end and just start swimming? Because
what
I'm
did
not.
Switzer say? Switzer said you're going to look back at this a few years later, and who made this decision?
And very well could. Now, you may not just simply from a security standpoint and a financial standpoint, but if we're talking just football, I do have my questions about that move, and it'll be very interesting to look up in about 5 years and see where everybody is situated.
And Jackson Arnold's a hell of a player from Guyer High School.
Sure.
But are they going to be able to land one after another, the quarterbacks that they had the last decade?
Yeah, no. I don't think so. I don't think you're going to get 4 Heisman Trophy winners in a row to show up on campus. That's Lincoln Riley. That's not Oklahoma. Sorry, but it's true. I mean, he was as much a part of that as any other element. So, no, I'm not totally confident that they will just rip that off. I have my doubts about just the way they're going to ease on into this thing, but we will see.
All right. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Paul.